In this video, we will cover how to establish a connection to your MongoDB environment and how to both read and write data into MongoDB easily. We can first create a new MongoDB Connection Manager by right-clicking in the Connection Manager's window and selecting New Connection. From the list, we can select MongoDB to add our new connection to the package. The first page, Servers, lets you configure the server addresses for your MongoDB deployment. When MongoDB is selected, you will be able to add one or more servers as needed and set each host and port. The other scheme is MongoDB plus SRV, which just requires the host. The UUID subtype is set to subtype 4 as subtype 3 is deprecated. If we go to the authentication page, the first authentication type is basic, where the credentials can be set. SASL mechanism initially is set to default, but from the drop-down you may select a specific SASL type as required. If there are no credentials required to connect, you may select the None option. The next option is X509, and this provides a hyperlink to the TLS page. On this page, when you enable Use TLS, you can select a certificate location where a local path to the certificate may be provided, or SAS URL if stored in an Azure Blob Storage or Azure Files. If we change the certificate location to store the certificate's thumbprint can be provided. Lastly, on this page, you may choose to ignore certificate-related errors. This may be helpful in testing to overcome any such errors. Back in the authentication page for both Kerberos and LDAP, let MongoDB use your company's existing user accounts and passwords for authentication. Kerberos uses your company's existing credentials, while LDAP checks your username and password against a central directory. In the next page, SSH, you may enable to properties by checking the Use SSH tunnel. If you have a tunnel, you may configure the SSH tunnel here. Under the authentication method, key and password are supported. The last page, Advanced, contains additional advanced properties you may set. They are grouped by category to easily find them. You may have noticed from the previous pages, some of the properties are familiar and already populated. Authentication will have properties based on the authentication type currently selected. General properties define the core MongoDB connection properties. Pooling properties help configure for connection reuse and performance by controlling how connections are maintained, reused, and released. Replica set properties configures replica set communication, write consistency, failover handling, and read preference behavior. Server selection and discovery properties control how MongoDB servers are monitored, discovered, and selected for operations. SSH properties enable secure tunneling to MongoDB environments. SSL properties provide encrypted communication between SSIS and MongoDB through configured certificate. TLS properties allow you to configure modern transport layer security options, including certificate validation. When we have configured the Connection Manager, the Test Connection button can be used to see if a successful connection has been made to the service. When satisfied with the configuration, pressing OK saves and closes the Connection Manager window. After the Connection Manager has been created, we can use it within our MongoDB Source Component to read data from our environment. In the SSIS toolbox, we can drag and drop this into our data flow window. In the General page, we can set our existing MongoDB Connection Manager or create a new connection directly using New. Now we can define how we would like to retrieve data from MongoDB. We begin by selecting a database. To the right, the refresh icon can be clicked to refresh the database selection. You may choose the collection you want to work with in the drop-down as well. When the collection is selected, there will be an optional prompt if we want to import documents from MongoDB. Selecting Yes will take us to the MongoDB document importer. This will build the document design based on the criteria. The database and collection are already configured. You may set a value for the number of documents to scan or 0 to read all. The query can help filter down to a subset of documents to get a specific design. Output as raw text can be enabled if you want to output the data as a single column as a raw text format. This way, each row of data will be contained to one column. If you select this option, the Document Designer page will not be available as it's not required. In the Query window, you would be able to provide a query if you would need to filter the data you want retrieved. Otherwise, it will return all. To show additional variables and functions, click the option. This allows for a more interactive experience when building a query. The query also allows for variables to be added to make the search dynamic between executions. We can change the source type to change stream to make use of the change stream feature. This is helpful to track transactional changes for a MongoDB collection. The input variable type dropdown allows for no input variable set, operation time as a date time value to indicate the start point, or resume token to use a string value of the resume token from the previous execution. For both operation time and resume token, the input and output variable can be selected from the dropdown. The last option in the source type is grid.fs, which allows you to request a file stored within MongoDB's grid.fs. A bucket can be selected from the dropdown. A query can be set for this option to filter on which file is retrieved. Visible for all pages, the FX icon allows you to dynamically set expressions for available properties in the component. The documentation icon can be used to generate metadata information on how the component is currently configured in terms of the columns available and their data types. If we move to the Document Designer page, this allows us to import and export design structures and adjust the generated nodes along with their settings. Since we previously imported our design, the layout is pre-populated. At the top of the page, there are options to add a new node, placed in the hierarchy at the cursor's location. Selected nodes can be removed along with all nested nodes. Node name, node type, and output data type can all be changed as required. Nodes can also be moved within the hierarchy. The Rename Nodes dropdown can be selected to set the full qualified node name based on the node location in the document, or the short name to set as the given node name directly. Filter columns allows you to see just the basic columns or all columns. In this case, a new column is added. You may also find nodes by filtering on a keyword. The node type can be changed. Raw, in this case, would store the node's value as a single line of text. The output type can be adjusted to set the type of output for a node. For object, this can be either an output or none. Raw only allows for column, and array has a few different options, including having the property name as column value or a key value pivot. The output settings for a node can be used to specify the data type for a value node or provide a link between child and parent output. If we click on a specific node, we can see the column editor. Import allows you to import the design with the methods available. If you have a designer settings file that was exported previously using the export option, the design can be repopulated with any changes to the document designer or additional settings. Document MongoDB would open the same document importer window as we saw before, or a local file or schema file could be used. We will change the details node to be an output to show how multiple outputs can be handled later in the columns page. Lastly, with the export option, the current designer settings configuration can be exported to a designer settings file, preserving structure and configuration. If we go into the Additional Settings tab, there are some additional settings that can be applied. We can specify the encoding we want to work with using the dropdown. If there is a null, we can set how we would like to handle this in the null mode property. The isRepeated text qualifier can be set to one of the available characters or none. This is helpful when the isRepeated column is set to true for one or more nodes. The isRepeated text delimiter also has a dropdown where a specific character may be chosen. This is also helpful when the isRepeated column has been set to true for one or more nodes. The output time zone can be changed. By default, this is UTC, but local is available. The last option under this section can be enabled if node names are case insensitive. By default, this is disabled. Over in the third page columns, this section displays all available columns from the document designer. We can choose which output to view using the dropdown. For selection, all can be selected or excluded with a single click, otherwise manually choosing fields individually. The two filtering options, Hide Unselected and Hide Selected, help narrow the column list. To search for a column name quickly, you may enter it into the field. This will filter based on the string provided. When we are finished with our configuration, click OK to save. Finally, the source component exposes output paths that depend on the configuration. Dragging destination components onto the data flow window allows us to view and map the available outputs in the input-output selection. In our example, we can map the route and the details output to flow downstream. To write to your MongoDB instance, you would be able to work with our MongoDB Destination Component. In the flow, we have already included example data sources, so now we can drag and drop our components to connect the inputs to the destination. For the general configuration, we can work within the first page. The same connection manager may be selected if you have an existing one. Otherwise, a new connection can be created. Next, from the drop-down, we can select the database we want to work with. You may refresh the database or the collection if you see the refresh icon on the right. From the destination type drop-down, we can work with a collection or grid.fs. Grid.fs is helpful to store large files in chunks inside MongoDB, making large file uploads easier. For the actions, you would be able to insert a file or delete an existing file. The last option, max degrees of parallelism, when available for the different destination types and actions. It controls how many CPU cores can be used in parallel for a single query. This can be explicitly set or 0 for unlimited. If we switch to the collection destination type, we can select a collection from the dropdown. The document importer pop-up will occur if you want to scan the documents in the collection to build the document designer structure. Yes takes us to a configuration page for the scanning process. The database and collection would be populated if already set previously. You may limit the number of documents to scan, or set this to 0 for scanning all documents. Lastly, the query window would allow you to filter on a subset of documents. Based on the design, you can map the upstream inputs. From the Actions dropdown, you may select the type of action when writing to MongoDB. You may insert new records, replace to overwrite existing records, update to partially modify existing records, or delete to remove records. Input time zone indicates what format any datetime values are in, and uses this information to write the correct date to MongoDB. If you need the record added as one column of raw text, you may select the input as raw text option. Use upsert enables the upsert functionality on the current action, and can apply to the replace and update action. Limit matches to 1 when enabled will only allow one document to match the filter string in the collection. Note, this can only be applied to the update and delete actions. The Match by Mode dropdown lets you match by either choosing one or more matching keys in the columns page, or alternatively, provide a constructed query. Construct query allows you to construct a filter string interactively from available conditions and operators. On the left side, you can drag and drop input columns and variables to inject those dynamically into the filter. The options found at the bottom of the component are available on all pages. The Import Document Designer will be familiar if you need to rescan your documents. Map Unmapped fields will map all input columns that match the name of the MongoDB destination fields for the current input selected. Clear All mapping would unmap all columns. The FX icon will take you to the Property Expressions editor. Here, you may select an available property to dynamically change this during runtime. Lastly, the Generate documentation can be used to generate a Word doc that describes the component's current metadata. After the general configuration, we can go to the Document Designer page. If we imported using the document importer previously, this would be populated. At the top, we can also manually add nodes, and this would add it to the bottom of the current hierarchy. The current node can be moved, or the node and its children can be deleted. Rename nodes will allow you to specify how the node name should be represented. Full qualified node names based on the node location in the document, or use short names to use the given node name. The filter columns may add additional columns if available, if we select Show All Columns. A node can be found quickly by using the filter nodes and entering a string. The node's type can be changed using the Node Type dropdown. Both the node's name as well as the input or column name can be seen. Is repeated can be used to specify if a node is repeated within the document. With format string, you can specify the target output format for a string, and is helpful for converting datetime or number values to a string. Source type for an object can either be an input, property name from column value, or none. For value and raw, this can be column by default, a static value, or a variable. For an array, this can be input or none. With the node write settings, you can view and change the data type of a value or raw node by double-clicking or the relationship editor. This can also be opened for a child array to adjust or establish a relationship. The input editor can further be configured by adding or removing columns. In the bottom right, there are also additional ways to import or re-import our design if required. With the first option, Designer Settings, you can import a settings file previously exported by our component. This will populate the views and configure the additional settings. With the Inputs option, you may reset the design based on your upstream inputs. Document MongoDB is the same option that we saw previously, and the design will be generated based on the structure of the items that are scanned. The last two options, you may choose a local JSON file or JSON schema file on your local machine. Export Designer Settings lets you save the designer settings to preserve the design and document designer additional settings configuration. In the next tab, the design can be seen in a diagram view. The input can be edited to add, remove, or make data type changes to any node. A new input can also be created or deleted here. The next tab, Preview, lets you see a sample of the document filled with test values. In the Additional Settings tab, you may choose how to handle the value null mode, how to handle when there is an empty array, or how to handle when there is an empty object. Link IDs, our scrambled option, when enabled, is helpful when there are multiple inputs available when writing. You would be specifying if the IDs are scrambled between the inputs and you expect them to come in a random order. Internally, the component will perform an in-memory match and join. With the repeated text qualifier, you may specify which qualifier to use when the isRepeated property is set to true. The isRepeated text delimiter is similar in that you may specify the text delimiter used in a document when it isRepeated property is set to true for one or more nodes. In the next page, Columns at the top, we can select the input we want to work with, as we saw before. The input can be switched, and you would see the mapping reflected. The key icon is used if an action requires matching by key, which we set earlier. We can set one or more keys for the matching criteria. An input column can be manually mapped or set to ignore to exclude it from the mapping. The data type column would indicate the data type that was set in the document designer. The object ID can be checked, and this will convert the input value of the ID to a string literal. This is helpful in cases where writing to MongoDB collections where the ID field is not stored as plain string and instead as an actual object ID. The last page, Error Handling, is used to help you specify how errors should be handled when they occur, as well as additional output columns that can be enabled. By default, this will be set to fail the execution when an error occurs. Ignore errors can be set to skip the error and continue the operation. Redirect rows to error output can be selected to redirect just the rows that have received an error and have them flow in a new error output path for inspection and further processing or logging. There are some additional columns available in the default output that have been returned in the response. We can show these additional columns after we save our component's configuration. The first path we connect is the default path where successfully written rows flow through. If we double-click on the path and go to the metadata, the new columns are made available. Same for the error output path. If we connect this, we would be able to see the rows that have failed here, as well as their row data. There are 3 additional columns here: error code, error column, and error message, available for troubleshooting or logging. There is an additional error output path where orphaned children rows that have errored would flow. This would include columns for the error, parent and current column. We hope this video has been helpful in your understanding in working with our MongoDB Connection Manager, Source and Destination components. Give this a try as part of your MongoDB integrations. KingswaySoft, data integration made easy.